A few months back, I got my hands on the Kizer Hare that I've got here, and I had a very mixed review about it. There were certain things that I loved about it. Excellent build quality, great handle, very cool looking blade geometry, nice Nitro V steel, a lot of things to love. But I'd been a little underwhelmed with its cutting performance and with different ways of carrying it, and so I kind of left it by the wayside for a while. More recently, I decided, all right, let me look at the two main things that stopped me from loving this knife more and see if I could fix them, resolve them. I do really think I've redeemed the knife to a fair degree in my eyes, and I wanted to talk through that for anybody else who's thinking about it, or maybe even has one and has shared some of the feelings of underwhelm that I've had. First off, the cutting. I kept having an issue where when I ran my thumb on the blade, it felt very sharp. When I did the fingernail test, it definitely caught. A lot of the quick little tests to see if your blade is pretty sharp, it passed all of those. But then in practical application, it just did not feel very slicey. I ended up bringing this to a buddy of mine's house who is way more knowledgeable about sharpening than I am, and he's got a belt sander and the whole 9 yards, and he did some real work on this for like 45 minutes to an hour. One of the observations that he made about it, which I think could have explained some of what I kind of found, was he said the blade was imbalanced on each side. It wasn't symmetrical. It was like at a slightly different angle on one of the sides than another, and the quick work that I had done on the guided field sharpener just wasn't enough to balance that out. And after he really put it on the belt sander to put more of a 20-degree edge on both sides and make sure it was equal right away, when I started doing some tests on it, it cut better. And then when I put it to smoother and smoother stones all the way down to stropping at the end, the last couple of times that I used it, big difference in cutting performance. So I don't know if this is more of a widespread issue that's maybe some quality control for Kizer, or if I just got a dud that was not profiled very well out of the factory, but either way, I can see more what people liked about this knife. And the other thing, which you could see in the beginning of the video, is carrying. Now, in my original review, I had mentioned I feel like when you do a review of a knife, to be fair, you have to kind of rate it as it comes in the package. So even if you have a problem that you could arguably solve by an Alti-clip or some aftermarket thing, there has to be a part of it where you say, but such as it is out of the box, here's my thoughts. Okay, well, having now owned this knife quite a few months, I liked the idea of scout carry with it before, but with the clip that came with it, it always stuck out too far. If I tried it in this position, it always was like too much of an angle and always created a weird lump in the shirt. So what I've done here is taken some pieces of leather that I have and wrapped them around and made kind of makeshift scout carry clips. In here, it's a little tighter than I would have wanted. If I did it again, would have had a little more play in here, but such as I currently have it positioned, there's very little noticeable bulge in the shirt. It carries a lot more comfortably than anything I had tried before, and very easy to access and put away. I had done the behind the body scout carry before, but it's a little fidgety to put it away. Much better situation, feels more natural. Not going to say it's perfect, and I'm not entirely sold at this point on always EDCing a fixed blade over a pocket knife or a multi-tool, but I would not hold that against this particular knife. The adjustments definitely helped, but I would say it mostly took the knife from underwhelming to decent. It's still not an incredible slicer. That's not shocking. I mean, if you look at the blade geometry, it is what it is. Comments I got on my previous review video had a great point where they basically said, you picked the right tool for the job. You have to go into this knife kind of understanding what it is and what it's probably made for just based on the geometry. You have a very thick spine, especially for a knife this small, and it's a very wedge shape, kind of like certain Spyderco knives. This inherently means it's not going to be as slicey as other knives because it's just a thick piece of steel. And no matter what kind of edge you put on the very edge, you're still limited by that. I definitely, after these changes, noticed that it cut through certain things like rope fairly well. Heavy gauge cardboard, like this that you're seeing here, it did okay as long as you followed the grain, but if you laid it down and cut across it on the really heavy cardboard, it struggled to get all the way through the other side. when I switched to what you would call quote-unquote regular cardboard like you'd get in an Amazon box, it did a better job of cutting all the way through that when laying down, but I did definitely have to push down a good amount to get it to do that. So not like cutting apart cardboard like this is something that I or most of us would do most of the time, but as a test, I would say I definitely have other knives that do a better job. Even the Kizer Milita that I also reviewed recently, thinner blade stock, much slicier knife. It does a much better job with cardboard, both types. But, you know, I cut things like paracord, cotton rope, twine, zip ties. It did okay as a general utility knife, and so I wanted to at least make this video to acknowledge there seemed like there were some blade imperfections out of the factory on the one that I got, and the summary would be, after working on the blade a good bit, on the edge that is, I was able to correct a lot of that, and it took a knife that I was disappointed in and thought this is a nicely made knife that I'll probably not really ever use, and it's qualified itself back into my occasional rotation. Now I thought that was worth noting, but I would still say, even with all the work I've done on the blade, it's not an incredibly slicey knife, not compared to a lot of other ones that I've tried, and so adjust your expectations. If this particular blade shape and use case makes sense for you, if it's what you're looking for, if you're not going to be cutting cardboard or some of that other stuff very often, maybe you don't care, maybe this is great. And if so, then that's kind of why I wanted to tell you all of this. I would still say after watching certain other people's review videos that it looked like they had an easier time going through some of these materials like cardboard and rope than I did. So it's possible that the work I've done on the edge still hasn't totally corrected for what I have going on, and I'm probably outside the return window, and especially with how much work I've done on the edge at this point. It just is what it is for me at this point. But anyway, I did feel that this kind of redeemed the Kizer Hare a fair bit to me and made it a practical and more usable knife, and so seemed worth talking through with you guys. If you've had knives like this and you've had to do some work on them, or you found things that really helped them be a lot slicier, or especially if you have a Kizer Hare and if you have done some adjustments to the edge that have overcome some of these issues that you might have experienced themselves, I would love to hear your input on that for some further things I can try. And otherwise, guys, thanks for joining me. I hope I'll catch you in the next one.